Charging an army or a citadel first usually meant certain death. Forlorn hopes were the small groups of men assigned these perilous assignments. Charging into a bridge first drew the enemy's fire or shielded their colleagues as retreat. They constituted the spearhead of an army. There were practically always enough volunteers despite great risk. We sought to explain in this video why troops in the Napoleonic Wars were ready to give their lives in such suicide operations. Future Duke of Wellington, Arthur Wesley, assaulted Villa Rodrigo, a Spanish city under Napoleon Bonaparte, in January of 1812. After several days of bombardment, Wellington gave the order to storm on the evening of the 19th of January, 1812. As darkness set, two forlorn hopes moved against the breaches before them, lay the most difficult job an infantry soldier could imagine. They had to struggle through a network of deadly traps, penetrate a well-defended defensive line, and finally knock the enemy of their superior position on the wall. William Mackey, a young lieutenant of the Connaught Rangers, better known as the Devil's Own at the Forlorn Hope at the Northwestern Bridge, when he realized that the way was utterly barricaded. He had his men scale the walls to the right and left of the bridge. They suffered heavy casualties and made it to the top only when the vanguard, which had followed hard on their heels, pushed on. The French began to fall back. But suddenly, a mine exploded, killing those already on the wall. Though nearly destroyed, Mackey's Forlorn Hope accomplished its goal and created a path inside the town. Mackey was one of the few that lived following the siege. His actions brought him honors and a promotion to captain. Those who offered their time for the Forlorn Hope stood to lose a lot but also gain much. Irish Major Peter O'Hare expected he would be victorious, a lieutenant colonel or cold meat within a few hours. The death toll was severe at the first siege of Badajoz in 1811. Just 18 of the 200 men who attacked Fort San Cristobal returned to the English camp. Nevertheless, from a tactical point of view, if Forlorn Hope was particularly effective, if successful, it could terminate a siege within a few hours, saving tremendous resources, money, and lives. From an army commander's standpoint, it's evident why Forlorn Hopes were chosen. What is more difficult to grasp is why individual soldiers took the danger. The Forlorn Hopes of the Napoleonic battles were made famous by the brilliant storyteller Bernard Cornwell and his incisive series. In the book Sharpe's Company and its filmization, the fictitious hero Richard Sharpe throws himself into the breaches at Badajoz at their sharp edge. However, Forlorn Hope technique per se existed long before the Napoleonic Wars. It was used by various armies throughout the Middle Ages and the early modern period, for example, in the English Civil War. Cromwell's new model army utilized Forlorn Hope companies to draw the enemy's fire and force them to betray their location, or to blow up mines before the main force attacked. In 18th century France, regiments known as enfants perdus in English, lost children served as assault warriors. Finally, the Forlorn Hope of the German lands connects composed of a small squad of strongly armed men who fought under a blood-red banner and tried to split the opposing ranks to create a weak point. Because these troops worked independently from the main force, they were known to as Valernaufen in German or Verlerep in Dutch, both of which literally translate as lost heap. So in original usage, the word Forlorn Hope refers to a unit called heap or lot that functioned independently of the main force and was in this sense lost. When English speakers first met the expression for glory and hope, they misheard it as Forlorn Hope. The phrase now used to indicate a hopeless or desperate undertaking, a suicide mission in many armies. A Forlorn Hope consisted of volunteers, convicts who sought to clear their identities, and individuals chosen by a lot. Wellington's Forlorn Hopes, on the other hand, were formed up nearly entirely of volunteers. When the officers were looking for soldiers a few days before an assault or combat, they often even battled for a position in the Forlorn Hope. For example, some non-commissioned officers temporarily fought as privates below their actual rank. And soldiers were also known to pay their comrades to buy their way in. There were actually a few good reasons to volunteer. Those who survived a mission in the Forlorn Hope were lavishly rewarded. Officers who volunteered were routinely promoted, which attracted young, ambitious men. There was no certainty of promotion, at least in Wellington's army, but the odds were considerable. In addition, the volunteers were often decorated and financially rewarded, which probably encouraged ordinary soldiers, who rarely owed much, to take the risk beyond the official rewards. Those who entered the city first could get a head start on plundering, a practice for which Wellington's troops, once called the scum of the earth by Wellington himself, were notorious. In addition to reward and advancement, joining a Forlorn Hope offered an opportunity to build a reputation for oneself. William Mackey, who we met in our introductory example, did not volunteer because he was hoping for a promotion. He was the most senior lieutenant in his unit, and would have been captain anyhow. As soon as one of his superiors perished, his motive was his code of honor as an officer. The officers of the period were willing to offer their lives for honor, and being part of the Forlorn Hope, or perhaps leading it, was one of the highest honors of all. The example of Captain Uniacke, who was seriously injured in the explosion during the storming of Ciudad Rodrigo and died 3 days later, indicates how strongly this mattered to men of honor. Uniacke did not dedicate his dying words to his beloved wife. Instead, he shouted, quote, "Recall, I was the first one that entered the bridge." This approach reflects a definition of courage that could appear unfamiliar to us now, and contrasts greatly from the ideals popular in antiquity and the Middle Ages. In early modern conflict, heroic one-on-one battle had no place. People fought information, and their greatest chance for survival was to stick together. This required a different kind of bravery than what might be needed for a duel or an assault on horseback. This level of bravery needs disciplined steadfastness, the ability to confront death unblinkingly. In the name of one's country and comrades, stay in formation and execute one's duty. In this setting, joining the Forlorn Hope and taking the greatest danger of all was regarded extremely heroic, and those who did so had the possibility to become heroes to their companions. In Uniacke's situation, the hope was accomplished. According to one of his troops, quote, "His affability and personal courage had earned him the ideal man of his company." Mackey was also driven by this motivation. The siege of Ciudad Rodrigo was not the only time on which he volunteered. At the second siege of Badajoz, a few weeks later, he was again one among the first to mount the wall, and at the Battle of Salamanca, he volunteered to join a horse assault. One of his buddies later wrote of him, quote, "And those who knew the temperament of the man were not astonished at it." Wherever glory and danger were to be met, there was Mackey to be found, and nothing, not even the horrible images he had encountered, could quench his brave spirit. It was anthems of praise like this that the soldiers of the day dreamed of when they volunteered for the Forlorn Hope Inn.